My wife cheated on me and abandoned our daughters. Years later, she returns with another man's child to form a family with us. Some context here, my ex-wife Angela, 36, and I, 37, met when we were about 25 years old. I was around 24. We were working at the same company and that's how we met. After being in a relationship for 2 years, we got married, and within 3 years of our marriage, we had 2 daughters, now 9 and 7 years old. The second pregnancy was unexpected, and she wasn't happy about it, but she didn't terminate it, even though I told her it would be okay if she did, since I didn't want her to go through something she didn't want. After our first daughter, things were still great between us, and we were as in love as we could be. But that changed after the second pregnancy. She became really moody and irritable and constantly criticized me or our eldest daughter. But I just thought this was due to all the hormones and stuff and tried to make peace with this new version of Angela. We thought this would change after a while, but things only progressively got worse, and my daughter and I learned to walk on eggshells around her. I was handling everything, even though she was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom. She quit her job willingly after our first daughter and did all the work in the house besides taking care of our eldest daughter while I worked. When she got pregnant for the second time, we had to hire a housekeeper because she said she was too tired to do the work in the house besides taking care of our daughters. Though it was a bit out of our budget, I agreed since I wasn't earning enough at the time. I agreed to hire a housekeeper because I didn't want to inconvenience Angela, especially while she was pregnant. I assumed she would go back to handling the house and the kids during the day after our second daughter was born as well. Let me make it clear that I wasn't one of those husbands who didn't do anything in the house after coming back from work. I did all I could to help, though I used to be exhausted from working. After she gave birth to our younger daughter, I thought it would take a few months, but then she would recover and we could go back to our normal life. But several months went by, and she showed no signs of changing. She remained just as moody and irritable and refused to do any work in the house. She just stayed at home all day watching TV, not even playing with the kids or anything, and paid our neighbor to take them to the park occasionally. I don't want to sound resentful, but I did feel that way because I was working day and night, and she wasn't even doing the bare minimum at home. It was also getting quite expensive for me to pay a housekeeper to do all the cooking, cleaning, and other chores. I also had to handle all other expenses and wanted to save money for our daughter's future too. That was becoming almost impossible because Angela refused to help me in any way. So after almost 6 months since the birth of our younger daughter, I decided we couldn't go on like this, and I had to talk to Angela. I knew this was going to be a difficult discussion, so I asked my parents to take care of our daughters for a day, and they agreed. That day, I sat Angela down and told her that I knew she was tired after 2 pregnancies, but I needed her to help me out here and work with me. I explained that having a housekeeper was becoming too expensive for us and I needed her to keep her word and go back to doing at least some of the housework so we could renegotiate and cut down the housekeeper's pay, which would allow us to save some money. She opposed the idea and shot it down instantly because she said she was too busy taking care of the kids to do any work in the house and that I should earn more instead of making excuses and blaming her for my financial situation. I tried to tell her that I was already doing my best, but she also had to do her best if we wanted to make this marriage work. I also mentioned how she wasn't really taking care of the kids because, from what I knew, she just let them watch TV with her and sit with her for hours while she watched trashy reality shows. This is what the housekeeper had mentioned to me once in a conversation. Soon, I realized that mentioning it was a big mistake because she went ballistic and accused me of spying on her through the housekeeper. After that, she went on a tirade against me and said she wasn't going to take this anymore, that she was done being manipulated by me and forced to do all the work while I did nothing but sit at a desk for a few hours a day. Then she told me that this was my fault for not being able to afford a housekeeper and that it was a shame that I had to beg her to help me since I was supposed to be the man of the house. It was all really illogical, and she was just grasping at anything to try and make it seem like there was nothing wrong with her doing nothing all day and that I was the crazy one for expecting her to actually contribute and do her part in the house. We ended up in a giant fight, and she called me a loser who couldn't afford to be with a woman like her anyway, and I responded by calling her a lazy cow who had already failed at being a good mother given the way our eldest daughter was scared of her and was now also failing at being a wife. That comment really hit her hard, and she pushed me hard. I lost my balance and fell back onto the coffee table really hard, shattering the glass and injuring myself. I had to be rushed to the hospital, and she kept apologizing to me and crying the entire time. Fortunately, I only injured my back, and they were superficial injuries, but I could have been seriously hurt and no longer trusted Angela. I told her she had to move out because I didn't trust her around the kids, since who knew when she could lose control with them and end up hurting them. I also told my parents to take care of our daughters until she was gone. For a week, she kept protesting and said she would never let this happen again, but I just couldn't trust her anymore. I almost filed for divorce, but she begged me to give her a chance, and by the end of the week, we came to the conclusion that she was going to live with her parents for a while and get therapy. Only when a medical professional deemed her fit would I allow her to come back and live with us. There was obviously something very wrong with her, because happy people don't act that way, but she was willing to work on it and get better. Plus, I didn't want my daughters to grow up without their mother, so I agreed not to divorce her at that time and give our marriage another chance. We were also getting couples therapy while living apart, but eventually, it all turned out to be useless because she ended up cheating on me. My parents had moved in with me to help with my daughters while Angela was living with her parents. We were going to couples therapy sessions weekly, and things seemed to be improving for a while. I was also in touch with her therapist, who told me that she had been suffering from postpartum depression but was improving. One of her symptoms had been anger issues that she didn't have before, but they got out of control when she pushed me, and that was a wake-up call for both of us. This continued for almost a year, and around the 6th month, I even let her visit our daughters under my supervision. She was slowly going back to how she used to be, and I was glad to see that. Finally, I felt like our situation was improving, and we could really make it work. But then suddenly, she stopped coming to our therapy sessions without any explanation. She also stopped responding to me, but I knew she was progressing because her therapist kept me informed. It didn't make sense to me, and for weeks I kept trying to talk to her, but she just ignored me and said she wanted some time for herself. Finally, after almost 3 months of avoiding me, I decided to visit her at her parents' house. I hadn't done that before because her parents didn't like me and blamed me for driving their daughter crazy and making her act out like that, so she had told me it would be better if I didn't visit while she lived with them, since that would only lead to a lot of drama, and that was definitely the last thing we needed. But I broke that rule and visited anyway, since she had been acting distant and avoiding the therapy sessions, and even when she showed up occasionally, she seemed disinterested, and I just couldn't understand it. When I tried to talk to her in person, on the phone, or even by text, she would tell me everything was fine, but I could tell by her behavior that she was definitely hiding something. The day I got to her parents' house, I hoped she would be home, but she wasn't there. When I asked her parents where she was, they told me they weren't authorized to tell me and shut the door in my face. I could tell they were enjoying this, and I had a bad feeling about it, so I decided to call Angela while standing in front of her parents' house. I tried calling her several times, but she didn't answer, and with every second that passed, I grew more and more paranoid. So I decided to snoop around the house and get in somehow on my own. I went to the backyard because I knew her parents usually kept the kitchen door open, but I didn't even need to get that far because I saw Angela sitting on the swing set her parents had in the backyard. The bad news was that she was sitting with her back to me because she was making out with a guy I didn't recognize. It's been a long time since I saw them, but it's etched into my brain because it was the most horrifying moment of my life, and I haven't been able to forget it even today. The guy she was making out with backed off as soon as he saw me, and when Angela turned around, I had already started walking back to my car. She caught up to me and tried to stop me, but I wasn't listening to anything she said because I was in shock. She tried to grab me, but I pushed her away and told her not to touch me, so she didn't. I got back into my car and started driving back home. I blocked her everywhere as soon as I got home so she wouldn't have a chance to explain herself, and I told my parents that I wanted them to find a lawyer for me and informed them of what I had just witnessed when I visited Angela's parents' house. I didn't see or hear from her until we had to meet with a court-appointed mediator for our divorce settlement. By then, I had practically become a robot and was only functioning for my daughter's sake, but had shut down emotionally. I didn't feel anything, not even when I found out that Angela was relinquishing her parental rights because she had decided she didn't want to be with us anymore, that she wanted to be with the guy, let's call him Yoon, with whom I had seen her the other day. He was her childhood friend, and though they had drifted apart after high school ended, they had reconnected when she moved back in with her parents and had apparently fallen in love with him. Her parents also supported this, which probably explains why they didn't want to tell me anything that day. Apparently, they had always wanted her to end up with Yoon, and they were happy that Angela was finally choosing herself and her own happiness, as if she had ever been capable of doing anything different from that. The divorce was a long process because, even though she had been cheating on me, she still wanted to qualify for alimony. It took us a while, but my lawyer and I fought hard to ensure she didn't get anything in the divorce because everything was legitimately mine, since I had been the one paying for everything for so long while she did nothing but watch TV at home. It's been 5 years since the divorce was finally settled, and we achieved our goal of ensuring she walked away with nothing. The months I spent dealing with the divorce were some of the hardest times for me, but I knew I couldn't give up because I had to take care of my daughters since they had no one but me. My parents were obviously very helpful and supportive, and I can never thank them enough for being there for me while I balanced work and taking care of my daughters. It's been 5 years since then, and though, at that time, the divorce seemed like the worst thing that could happen, I'm grateful for it now because I don't think I would be in the place I am today if it weren't for my decision to leave Angela. Life has really treated me well since then, and I am in a much, much better place now in every way. Since then, we have moved to a bigger house because I earn better now and don't have to spend money on anyone but myself and my daughters. My parents live nearby and visit occasionally. I also have friends who love me, and my daughters are as happy as they can be. That's all a man needs, and I'm very grateful to the universe that everything is going well for me now. Or it was until Angela showed up again a few days ago. The girls were in school, and I was about to leave for work when I opened the door, and Angela was standing outside with a child next to her. The child couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old, and I knew this had to be Angela's child. I was surprised to see her standing outside my door, still processing it when she started crying and said she was here to apologize and make things right with me. She told me she was finally ready to be a family again and give our marriage another chance. I couldn't believe she was back here after all these years and now wanted to give our marriage another chance as if it was up to her. In an instant, I made a decision and decided to shut the door and turn her down because I didn't want to let whatever this was into my life. But before I did that, I told her that this wasn't her family anymore. I stopped being her husband the day she cheated on me with Jorn. The divorce was just a legal formality, and she herself relinquished custody of her daughters, so she had no right to refer to us as her family now. After saying that, I shut the door and told her to leave because I didn't want her anywhere near my property. I might have thrown some curses her way too because I was really angry, but I refrained from doing that for the child's sake. I could hear her crying outside my door for a few minutes after I shut it, but I decided to ignore it, and once I made sure the coast was clear, I went to work. I tried very hard not to think about it because it would only weaken my resolve, and I couldn't afford that to happen. I almost managed to forget that Angela had even shown up at my house, but as soon as I got back home from work, I got a call from my parents demanding an explanation as to why I had turned her down. They told me that Angela had contacted them after I turned her down and shut the door in her face and that she was devastated. My parents said they were the ones who gave her my new address and told her to visit me since she was in the process of divorcing Jorn and finally had the chance to make things right with me. They told me Angela had reached out to them about a month ago, and this had been in the works for quite some time. My parents believed it was about time I thought about my daughters because my daughters needed a mother, so they decided she deserved another chance and told her where to find me and what to say to me. I was very angry with them because it wasn't their place to forgive her and decide to give her another chance without even asking me if I'd be okay with it. It could have been really bad if the girls had been home, and it was really reckless of them to do something like that. So I told them what I thought, but they refused to acknowledge that they had done anything wrong because they had helped me out during my divorce by taking care of the girls, and even now, they occasionally took care of the girls. They believed that whether I wanted to reconcile with Angela or not was my business and that they had an equal right to decide what was best for the girls, and I couldn't take that away from them. I thought it was ridiculous that they believed that because at the end of the day, they were my daughters and not theirs, though I respected and would always be grateful for what they did for me during my divorce. I didn't think it was their place to let Angela back into my life. We had a fight, but they told me I was the one out of line here and was being selfish by not giving Angela another chance. They told me they had done their due diligence and were sure she was a different woman now and deserved to be part of the girls' lives. Even when I reminded them that she had relinquished her rights, they said it was insulting that I believed they would endanger the girls or me and accused me of ruining their lives by being too arrogant to accept that the girls needed their mother. It's been a few days now, and I don't think I was out of line or selfish because I've thought a lot about this. I stand by my decision not to give my ex-wife a second chance to be a mother. Update 1. It's been about a week since Angela showed up at my door with her child, and I recently found out the truth about her relationship with my parents. Honestly, it's so disturbing that I don't even know where to begin, and I'm still struggling to process it myself. It's amazing how they all betrayed me without batting an eye. Apparently, not only were they the ones who gave her my new address, but they had also been in touch with her the entire time. I cut her out of my life after the divorce, but they didn't because they believed she would come back someday. They didn't talk much, only once a month maybe, but that was enough to make me feel betrayed. Yon made Angela relinquish her rights after she was served the divorce papers and gave her an ultimatum: either she abandoned her family and made a new life with him or kept in touch with her daughters and fought for custody. But that would mean leaving him behind. It was a difficult choice for her, according to my parents, but she ended up going with Yon to start a new family with him instead of staying with the family she already had. My parents said Angela contacted them shortly after I filed for divorce to tell them about her situation and ask for their help because she wanted to stay in touch with her daughters. Privately, she told them she was between a rock and a hard place on both sides either way. She couldn't see her daughters because I was fighting for full custody with supervised visitation rights, whereas Yon had ordered her to abandon her daughters altogether. Even if she fought for custody, the chances of her getting partial custody were slim given the circumstances of our divorce and her history of anger management issues, so fighting for custody seemed like a waste of time and resources to her. There was a very real chance that she could lose both Yon and custody of our daughters if she chose to fight. That is, before my parents intervened. They met with her privately, and she practically begged them to let her stay in touch with her daughters and asked them to act as a bridge between them. She was aware that once she relinquished her rights, she wouldn't have any visitation rights, let alone supervised visitation rights, but my parents would, and they planned to exploit that. They did so successfully and deceived me for years by going behind my back to allow Angela to meet our daughters. They did this because Angela's situation moved them, and they realized they couldn't in good conscience keep a mother away from her daughters. Stabbing their own son in the back for years, however, didn't affect them at all. They told me that every time I left our daughters at their house, they invited Angela and let her spend time with them. My daughters never told me they met with their mother because my parents bribed them with toys and sweets to keep quiet about it. Whenever I asked them what they had done at their grandparents' house, my daughters would tell me they played with my grandparents and their friend. I always assumed they must be talking about my parents' actual friends, whom I already knew, but apparently, that's what my parents had told my daughters to refer to their mother as in case I asked about their day. I couldn't believe my daughters had also been lying to me, but I forgave them because they are just kids, and also because Angela and my parents had really manipulated and intimidated them into keeping quiet. After I learned the truth from my parents when I asked my daughters if they had been meeting with their mother behind my back, they started crying and told me they couldn't tell me because they would be punished by God if they did. Angela and my parents had really instilled in their heads that there would be severe consequences if they told me the truth, and that's why they had been so secretive and vague all this time. I also felt like a terrible father for never asking my daughters what friends of my parents were spending time with them because it could easily have been someone else, someone more dangerous than Angela, and I never would have found out. But I'm going to put an end to this right now because I'm getting a restraining order against all of them. I already have written proof of this since my parents sent me an email to tell me the truth a couple of days after my fight with them. They believed the email would make me realize how desperate Angela was to stay a mother to her daughters without losing the so-called love of her life, and somehow that would make me forgive everyone involved. But all it did was make me realize that everyone here was a disgusting liar, and I couldn't trust anyone anymore. It's also ironic how Angela relinquished her parental rights and had to resort to meeting our daughters in secret as if it were a crime, all because Yon didn't want her to have any contact with her previous family, and he was supposedly her true love. But now they're getting a divorce, and all of that was in vain. They even had a child together, but according to my parents, Yon now wanted nothing to do with her or their child because he had gotten a job offer and was moving in a couple of months. Angela had started working again recently, and their child had started kindergarten here, so she didn't want to move with him, which is why they had been fighting for a long time. Finally, it all came to a head 3 months ago when Yon told her they were done and he was taking that job and moving. He no longer had any interest in being a family man because clearly, that meant he had to sacrifice his own future and happiness just to make her happy, and he wasn't willing to do that. All of this was supposed to make me feel sorry for Angela, but the only purpose it served was to make me feel that justice had finally been served. I've already talked to my lawyer, and the petition for the restraining orders has been filed. My daughters and I have also had a proper discussion about all this, and I've told them that going forward, they will never see their grandparents or their mother again, and they seem okay with it for now. But we're still going to therapy and trying to work through things because I'm sure this will be difficult for them, and it's probably been quite difficult for them these past 5 years. But this all ends now. Update 2. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for all the concern and support. I am truly grateful that so many people have been sending kind messages and blessings for my daughters. My parents and Angela have been served with restraining orders, and they are supposed to appear in court in a few days. I don't know how they feel about it because I've blocked them everywhere I could, and I've also told my friends not to talk to them in case they contact them. I've also increased security around my house and have been working from home for a few days. I spoke to the authorities at my daughter's school and told them about the situation. Initially, I didn't intend to let them go to school for a few days, but I didn't want their education to suffer because of Angela and my parents. So now, the teachers are supposed to keep an eye on them and not let anyone but me pick them up after school. I'm doing everything I can to ensure they can't contact us because I'm sure they will try. So far, everything has been going well, and I hope that after getting that restraining order, they will keep their distance. Update 3. Hello, everyone. This will be a brief update, but we managed to get that restraining order, and for the next 5 years, the 3 maniacs will have to keep their distance from me and my daughters unless they want to face severe consequences. Obviously, I'll continue to keep all the security measures I took for a while because the last time I saw them, they seemed really angry, and I don't want to take any risks. My daughters and I are attending regular family counseling sessions, and I believe we're going to make a lot of progress in the coming months. We've actually already made considerable progress. Honestly, all I want now is for my daughters to be happy, and that's all. So please keep sending us your best wishes. We need them. Update 4. Unfortunately, I have to share an unpleasant situation that occurred recently. This time, my mother and Angela showed up at my house unannounced. I was completely unprepared when I opened the door after they knocked and found them standing there. Angela started yelling and demanding to talk to me while my mother was backing her up with a defiant expression. Immediately, I decided to stay calm and try to de-escalate the situation. I asked them to leave, explaining that this wasn't the time or place to talk and that they had a restraining order and couldn't be there. But Angela flat out refused and kept yelling, accusing me of tearing her family apart and depriving her of her daughters. The situation grew increasingly tense, and I realized there was no reasoning with them at that moment. Seeing things getting worse, I decided to send my daughters to their room to protect them from the argument. I told them to stay there until I told them it was safe to come out. Meanwhile, I tried to keep Angela and my mother as far away from them as possible. The argument dragged on for some time, with accusations and yelling all around. Eventually, I managed to convince them to leave, but not before making it clear that I didn't want to see them on my property again, or I would call the police. I considered doing it at that moment, but I didn't want to traumatize my daughters further. I hope to meet with my lawyer soon and discuss what options we have. After they left, I went to comfort my daughters and explained what had happened as calmly as possible. It was a tough moment for all of us, but I hope we can get through it together. Angela's child wasn't there, which would have made the situation worse. What saddens me the most is that this poor child lives with a mother like that, which must be really difficult.